today's video is brought to you by NordVPN, a service I've been using for a long time and is becoming more relevant than ever, as we will talk about in today's video. Obviously, with the passing of the European Union directive on copyright and specifically Article 13. We'll be talking about that in today's video. So we're probably gonna see a huge rise in VPN traffic here in the near future because of net neutrality and now Article 13. But fortunately, NordVPN has you covered with thousands of servers in more than 61 countries, including, you guessed it, Europe. In fact, NordVPN even has a campaign going right now to bring awareness to this ongoing issue with a Fight the Meme Ban with Memes competition taking place. In fact, you guys can find a link down in the description below. It's designed to make people aware of what is happening and what we are talking about in today's video. But not only all of this, it's just good practice to protect and encrypt your data when you connect to the internet. With military-grade encryption, you can bet that the ISPs and the governments and all these other entities will not be spying on your data. In fact, new users who sign up for NordVPN using my offer code, Jayztwocents at checkout, can save 75% off a 3-year membership. That is a very small price to pay to maintain the open freedom of your internet experience. So what are you guys waiting for? Start taking things serious and shove it to Article 13 by signing up for NordVPN using my link in the description below. Well, I've just spent the last day or so benchmarking the brand new GTX 1650 from NVIDIA, a card that, if you look at other reviews, really is kind of confusing because it's like, why does it even exist? All right, I don't even know where to start with this one. NVIDIA is great at many things. It's great at building high-end graphics cards at a price premium. But spoiler alert, it's also great at building mediocre cards in the low end to mid-range at also a price premium. So here's the thing. When I started benchmarking the 1650, I was a little upset, like everyone else, because we received the cards from the AIBs about a week and a half in advance. And it's one of those things where, like, typically we get them in advance because we get advanced drivers, which is why I was kind of confused as to why they withheld drivers from press reviewers until retail launch. So it's kind of like, why do we have cards early if they are basically paperweights and we couldn't do anything with them? So I actually went to Twitter and I said, well, NVIDIA withheld drivers, which usually means they're hiding something. And in this case, having now reviewed the 1050, the 570, and the 1650 compared to, of course, the 1660 and the other cards that we've tested over the years, there's more than one thing they're hiding, as far as I'm concerned. Now, before we can actually talk about these cards, you have to see the performance so that you're on the same page as I am and caught up as to where these cards sort of stack up. So let's just go ahead and rock out with your charts out. I tested this EVGA GTX 1650 after starting to test with our MSI 1650. Now, both of these cards are above reference. NVIDIA doesn't actually have a reference or a Founders Edition 1650, nor do they have a reference 1660 or 1660 Ti. The reference cards start, or the Founders cards start at 2060 and up because, of course, RTX is their golden child, and that's the only one they truly care about, and I think that shows entirely on this lineup. Both of these cards are also using supplemental 6-pin power, which means that these are not as low as the performance that they could possibly be. These are slightly better, slightly factory overclocked and overclockable graphics cards, not relying just on the PCI Express power slot, or the 12 volt that comes to the power, or the PCIe slot, which is about 75 watts. So these are able to draw significantly more if you start to overclock them. Now in our test, I did not overclock them at all. These were out of the box settings, no power curve tweak, no fan curve tweak, nothing like that. So in terms of temperatures, it's important to note that these cards are, as you would expect, extremely cool, running at like high 50s to low 60s under their stock fan curves. No throttling whatsoever. They both sat right around 1950 to 1935 because GPU Boost 4.0. It went significantly higher than the clocks that were advertised. So that's how GPU boost works. We talk about that every time, blah, 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 broken record. But I still have to say it because people still don't seem to understand that. So I went ahead and went back and tested our 1050. Now the only 1050s I have are the MSI very basic, as you can see, cards with no power plugs, no multiple fans or anything like that. And this card is actually still available right now on the market. Now the performance gap that I saw between the 1650 and the 1660 was so significant that I went ahead and went back and tested my RX 570. Now at the risk of sounding like AMD had anything to do with us including the RX 570 in our benchmarks, that is 100% untrue, because I saw that other people are testing with the 570. And the reason for that is because the 570 is cheaper than a 1650. Now, although the Radeon team and the marketing team is really pushing the 570 right now, that's because this is the card that is closest in price to the 1650, which is the one that makes the most sense to compare if we want to do both sides of the fence. That's why we included the RX 570. So no conspiracy theories about AMD saying, hey, include our card, here's a $20 bill under the table. No, none of that happened whatsoever.
You do it for 20 bucks?
Well, add a couple zeros maybe. So the 570 that we included though was the Red Devil from Power Color. This is of course a custom PCB with an 8-pin power and triple fan and super long and heat pipes and all that. And someone might go, well, Jay, that's not fair. It's extremely fair because this card is still cheaper than the 1650 and decimating it in pretty much every single test that we did. And I say pretty much, it did. It did decimate the 1650 in every test and slid right in between the 1650 and the 1660 for cheaper than the 1650. It's a 4GB card, and although it doesn't have what some might say is some of the features of the NVIDIA card, like it doesn't have G-Sync. Well, so what? It has FreeSync, and there are more FreeSync panels for cheaper on the market. So you're still getting adaptive sync at the lesser price than the 1650s. You see online all the time, well, NVIDIA, will the price come down? Will the price come down? You never see a price adjustment down at the low end. They never do. They never adjust pricing. But if I bought a 570 at full retail, which was roughly 200, maybe 219, something like that for the 4GB card, this is a 4GB, and now it's available for 139, the prices always slide. Everyone knows the price is gonna slide. So if you early adopt Radeon, you definitely pay full price and then you kind of get screwed later because it comes down in price quite a bit. So AMD does indeed slide the price down, and they definitely did that with this launch. And yeah, if you bought one of these a few months ago, it might kind of sting because you could have gotten it cheaper than what you're paying right now. The other thing that is really disappointing about the 1650, and I mentioned the reason why they didn't show us these drivers ahead of time is because NVIDIA is probably hiding something. Well, yeah, they're hiding the fact that it is being decimated by the mid-range and low-end Radeon cards. I mean, it's sad. I started comparing the numbers and sorting them by order, and this card, the 1650, slid right in at around the 380X margin or area, which is over almost 4 years old. That's pre-Polaris. And this card wasn't even able to keep up with the 570 Polaris, again at a cheaper price point. Now the reason why you didn't see the MSI on our charts is because when I first started my testing, I started getting black screen flickering all over the place. And I went, well, maybe we got a bad card. Unfortunately, I couldn't let them know prior to launch because we didn't have drivers for me to test it. And they also told me in the email, both EVGA and MSI obviously were like, hey, we don't have drivers. NVIDIA will be sending those. You know, where they sent them was their own download website for everyone to grab on launch day. So I couldn't say, hey, what's wrong with your card? Then I hooked up the EVGA card and noticed the same black screen flickering issue when testing TimeSpy. It was isolated to TimeSpy. I didn't experience it in any of my other tests, including DX12 tests like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and anywhere else. I turned on DX12 to see if the problem persisted. It was isolated to TimeSpy. So already there's some issues happening with this card on that particular test. So that's why TimeSpy was omitted from our test entirely. It got a big fat fail in that particular test. So this brings us on to the discussion regarding the card's value. There really isn't. There's really no value with this card as far as I'm concerned. It's got a $150 MSRP. You can get this Red Devil card for, I believe it was $129, $139, available right now on Newegg. $170 or $60 for this card. So this card is $20 cheaper than this one. And significantly faster, up to like 20% faster in our tests. You wanna see what the performance value is like? It's like that. That's what it's like. If we wanna make a chart out of these two cards, there you go. Okay, but Jay, touring is so good, blah, blah, blah. What about the NVIDIA encoder with Turing? It's amazing if you want to do OBS and use one of these cards as an encoder. That's the other thing NVIDIA is hiding. It's using the Volta encoder. They didn't even include the Turing encoder with their Turing architecture on this. I think it's a stat boosting card so that they can say, look at how many Turing cards we have out in the wild. Hoping that people won't look at the Radeon offering at the lower price point thinking that, well, NVIDIA is just faster than AMD. Well, that's true once you start going above the $500 price point. NVIDIA is faster, but they also have a terrible value, extremely terrible value at this price point. So I kind of feel bad for the AIBs, if you want to know the truth. The AIBs are forced to make these cards. That's the agreement. They are the manufacturers for these lower end tiers and the higher end tiers, of course. They can't say, you know, NVIDIA, we're not gonna make a 1650. You can't do that. It's in their contract and their agreement that they have to make the cards. So they do the best they can with coming out with these custom designs, these power plugs and all of that, and unfortunately it wasn't nearly enough. Guys, at the end of the day, this card shouldn't exist. And I swear to God, if NVIDIA, who cares? If NVIDIA makes a 1650 Ti, I'm gonna lose my shit. I swear to God, I'm gonna lose my shit if they make a 1650 Ti. So if we look at the product stack from NVIDIA, it's 1650, 1660, 1660 Ti, 2060, 2070, 2080, 2080 Ti, and the Titan RTX. So here's my official conclusion. It doesn't need to exist. It shouldn't exist. It's NVIDIA's completely out of touch low-end and mid-range market where they're charging you a premium for nothing. There's no value to it whatsoever. For the first time in a long time, we can say, NVIDIA, welcome to 2 years ago for your competitor. Oh, and if you guys bought a 1650 because their reviews weren't available to tell you, well, you got duped. You got duped by the green machine, and well, I would probably use that return policy. But apparently AMD paid me to say all this, and NVIDIA pays me to say this, and blah, 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 blah.